where we can lock arms and to be an example to the world. That we may not be able to can solve every problem that is going on in our society, but I think if each person within the city asks themselves, what's in my hand, what's in my area of influence, how can I make the difference? I really think we can make this city a place where people will look to as an example of unity and really being a picture of what heaven will be one day.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Natasha.
My name is Latasha Jackson McDougall. I'm the founder and executive director of Cheryl's Voice. We provide education and resources for domestic violence victims, domestic violence awareness, and teen dating violence. I'm also a case manager with Tarrant County for the Domestic Violence Diversion Program. I'm here as a voice of hope. Being orphaned, Cheryl's Voice is an organization that was started from my childhood trauma. And being a Black woman who grew up orphaned, low income community, a lot of times you feel that there's no hope. And so I want people to know that there is hope. I want us to have that conversation about overcoming that childhood trauma.
Thank you. Lou.
What's up, y'all? Lou Charles, Fort Worth hip hop artist, based here my entire adult life. Some of the best advice that I got in my music career was not to think of music as, a self-serving act. It's more of a vocation. And because of that, whenever something feels off or feels wrong, I feel the responsibility to speak up and to also push the conversation forward. So my hope is just to offer my experience and be able to further push the conversation forward so we can see closer to eye on a lot of these different issues that are around.
Yeah, thank you. I just think about the group that's here and just what expectation and hope I have for our short time tonight. We're here at beautiful Backlot Studios in partnership with Red Productions, and so just there's businesses that are wanting to partner and have these to help this conversation. Every sphere of the city is represented, not everyone, but a number of them are represented here at the table, and so just thankful and hopeful for the conversation that we get to have. I wanted to start off, and we talked before. I don't want this to be too much of like I ask a question and everybody answers, but more of a dialogue. But I do want to start off just a little bit more personal with like, how are you guys coming into this conversation tonight? How tired are you? It's been a long few weeks, right? So just personally, like, where are you at coming into this space? Emotionally, your thought process, how tired are you is basically my question.
For me, I'm fatigued. I can honestly say that. I usually work. My creative output is taking a nosedive lately. I've questioned myself, what am I working for? And I've had that on my mind. What am I working for? What is the point of this? What does the end goal look like? Because time after time, my heart breaks. It breaks over and over and over again. And Jim, you asked me. You said, "Are you angry?" And I kind of recited that quote from James Baldwin. It was to be a woke Negro in this country means you're in a constant rage. Right. And for me, it's hard to live angry. It's hard to live in that constant sense of rage. But whenever I see somebody get choked on camera, whenever I see somebody running from the cops and getting shot in the back, it ignites that rage all over again. And then I go through those whole sphere of emotions. So to say how am I doing? I'm tired. I'm fatigued. And I'm looking for my why. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Wow.
I think for me, it's really just been day by day. I think probably the last couple of weeks, the day that really hit me hard was I was on a Zoom call and my wife walked past and I could tell she was visibly upset. She was crying. And I didn't hear any kids crying, so I'm like, all right, the kids are still alive. And my mind was halfway on that Zoom call and, really concerned about her. And so probably about 30 minutes later, I got off the call and said, babe, what's wrong? And she asked me, did you see what happened in Georgia? Did you see what happened to the young man? And I knew about it, and I hadn't shared any of that with her. And I said, I did. And she looked at me with tears running down her eyes. She said, that's my fear. That's my fear of our son, that someone will look at his brown skin and think it is a threat. And I remember just, trying to console her in the kitchen and walking back and sitting at my desk and just really begin to ask the Lord, like, why? 2020, why? And my son walks by and he says, Dad, are you okay? And I said, Eli, I'm praying for your future. And I'm asking God, I have life, I have platform, use me. And so I think for me, it's really been kind of a chomping at the bits in the sense that I see a great evil at work, but I think in my heart, I want to do everything that while the watch is on me in the time that God has given me, to do everything that I can to bring healing, to bring understanding, to bring reconciliation to this nation, that my kid, my son, my daughters will not have to have a conversation with their spouse one day like I had to have with my wife. And,
Yeah, man, the space that I'm in currently is that, I want to be exhausted, like my brother Lou, because I know that feeling. Yet I feel this responsibility to where exhaustion is not an option.
yeah.
Right? The responsibility is that the Lord has saw fit to put me in various rooms with various people. He's widened my network in my friend group. Even right down to in this room, this is not unnatural because I have some relationship with even all of you, right? And so being who I am from where I'm from, looking how I look, knowing who I am and whose I am, as far as the people I belong to as well, I understand that there is a responsibility that I have because although now it seems like the time to where powers that be, white people want to listen right now, there's still so many of us that I know that they would not listen to. I still know my cousins and my aunties. I still know those folks in my hood right now that have been screaming forever, continue to scream now, and they're still shunned and still not invited to be able to truly be heard. And I know that I have the responsibility that for whatever the reasoning, I get to be in these spaces where I can speak on behalf of them. And so as tired as I would like to be, and as tired as I am sometimes, the responsibility is nevertheless there. And if people are willing to engage in this conversation, then I feel it a duty to do so. The question gets asked a lot about, okay, finally they want to listen, why now? You should have been listening back then. And I get that sentiment, I really do. But with that being the case, I cannot dwell on the fact that at the time when we wanted it to happen and wasn't happening, it's happening now. And since it's happening now, I don't want to waste the opportunity. I want everyone to be able to hear everyone's truth. And for those who don't get the chance to speak, I get to be that voice.
Yeah, I think in my position now, where I am representing 1,700 men and women, who work as law enforcement officers, it's a very unique situation. Being a minority myself, and having experiences myself with law enforcement when I was younger. I mean, having all those things and carrying them into this job and this role, I also feel exhausted, exactly like Lou, because I feel like I have to represent a body, right? And speak for a profession that right now the profession's exhausted. And every time that something happens in Minneapolis or something happens in Atlanta, I feel the exact same way. We all do. And we say, not again. Every single one of us, me especially, say not again. Whenever something like that occurs, we know that there's gonna be people marching through the streets calling me racist, calling me a murderer, calling me scum, threatening my family because of the uniform that I've chosen to wear. And 1,700 folks feel the exact same way, and they carry that burden, and somehow they have to turn that into not being jaded also when, you know, I've got black and brown members that feel it dual ways too, you know. I've got black officers that have told me, man, you don't understand how hard this is, and I don't, you know. And so it's a dual responsibility, but at the same time, I like what you said, you know, speaking up and coming to the conversation and being able to say, hey, look, we all have common ground, and you know what? We can all denounce these things and say, you know what, that's not gonna happen in Fort Worth, Texas. And you know what, let's all bring our ideas together to make sure it doesn't happen in Fort Worth, Texas. Because nobody doesn't want it to happen more than a cop, you know what I mean? And I think that oftentimes gets lost, you know, whenever we consider just the tragedy that happened in 2019 with Tatiana Jefferson. We all consider that, and I guess what our officers are exhausted by is the last 5 years, they've done nothing but reform. You know, I mean, they've been through procedural justice training and racial bias training and all these things. And then after 2019, you know, we hired a police monitor. So these officers in the last 5 years have gone through so much different training, but then one thing happens, whether it's in Fort Worth or not, and it's almost like it landslides them back to square one. And so then they're tired at that point, and they say, man, we can never win. We can never do this enough because our communities don't trust us. And that's hurtful for a cop that signs up in his heart of hearts in her heart of hearts to protect and serve. It's hurtful whenever the community that you want to serve doesn't trust you, you know. That's hurtful, you know, and I think that's just a burden that every person who wears a uniform bears nowadays, and you know, I hope and I pray to God every single day that we can somehow take that burden off too, you know, so that we can all be one Fort Worth.
So a quick question for you, Manny, and I know we want to get to the other ladies
That's all right.
feeling as well.
Do it.
But it reminded me of something when you were speaking. You know, because you are in a position to where you do have the professional obligation to have to speak for a people group, right? So you have to speak for police officers. I mean, this is literally your job, right, as that representative. And yet the dual responsibility of being a person of color, of being in the Latinx community here in Fort Worth. So what is that like for you, and how do you ride that? Because you got your ethnic group, your affinity group that wants that one of theirs is at the top, right? And so the responsibility of representing that well and speaking to that, and then the dual responsibility of professionally being obligated to speak for your actual job.
Well, I'll tell you this. So about 5 to 7 years ago, I was asked to run. We have 3 associations in Fort Worth: the Latino Peace Officer Association, the Black Peace Officer Association, in the POA. And I was asked to run for president of the LPOA, Latino group. And I said, why? Why would I run for the Latino group? And they said, well, you know, we feel like the POA could be better. They could represent all officers a little better. And you could do it that way. I said, well, if you have a problem with how the POA is running, you don't change it by throwing stones from the outside.
Yeah.
You change it by getting in, changing hearts and minds. It's all that you can do. And so since I got involved in the POA, and we've been around since 1948, the association. I'm the first minority to ever be the president. And before I got involved, there was never a minority on the executive board. We have an 18-member board, 6-member executive board. Well, I appointed a black female as a vice president. We have another female who's a secretary. And then the president of the BPOA and the LPOA are both appointed to my board as full voting members. And the BPOA represents about 30 people, and the LPOA about 100. But it didn't matter to me. I said, you know what? Their voices are important. They've got to be on this board. In every single board meeting we have, I ask, is there anything specific to your members? Because I'm a member of all 3. Because I think that that's important. We need that viewpoint because it is a dual responsibility, especially in these times whenever, like I said, if something happens across the country, they judge you. You know, everybody judges you, and I don't see they as one group, I say society judges you for wearing uniform. You know, and like I said, that's painful, but it's tough to have dual responsibilities, but what's even more tough is having to explain to 3 young daughters, you know, why people are saying that they hate police officers when they know daddy's a police officer, you know, and that's what's tough. But I will say that's how I manage it, is by putting the responsibility on my shoulders and saying, you know what, let me change the system, and that's what we've done. And so when I say that the members have gone through a ton of change over the last 5 years, I don't just mean policies and procedures. I mean their association has changed as they know it also. So It's been wholesale change for the last 5 years.
How am I feeling? Honestly, I'm often saying that I live off the 3 C's: Christ, counseling, and coffee.
That's a good 3 right
And
there.
without those, I wouldn't even be able to sit here today, because there's so much that not only is going on right now, but as a Black woman, we go through things over a lifetime. And you start thinking about childhood, you start thinking about middle school, high school, and adulthood, and you're like, okay, what's going on? And then it seems like this year, I really want to trash 2020. It's like we started off wrong. And I'm like, God, I was all excited about this 2020, we're going to bring in the new year. And all of a sudden, it's totally different. We're getting death after death after death. And you're trying to figure out what just happened. It's hard to see, especially with George Floyd, because I will say I did not watch the video. But I did hear that possibly it was something to do with money involved. And I really thought about my granddad, because just a few weeks ago, he was at the store, and he was at 7-Eleven, and someone called the police on him because they said that his $20 bill was fake. And thank God, because my granddad, he was like telling him I wasn't trying to make fake money. And luckily, he called me, and I got there, and they were really nice. But I think about how different that could have went, and how bad it could have been. And so when we have these conversations, and I think about him, and I think about my uncles, I'm like, at any moment I could lose one of my close family members. And so it's not speaking up just for me and my family, but for other people. And so I've been constantly facing situations to where, I know great officers, and I know, people that aren't Black, that I'm usually like the only person that's Black at the table. And so how can I continue to make sure that they have my back in situations when I'm not there? Perfect example, I work in criminal courts, and most of the time I'm the only Black person that's even back there when we're looking at cases. And this individual, a white male attorney, came into my supervisor's office and started talking about hemp rope. Oh yeah, they used to make rope out of hemp. And before I could even have a reaction, my supervisor, who is a white woman, immediately jumped in and intervened. And that made me feel good at a point, because she could have laughed at it, she could have ignored it. And so I started thinking about all these little pieces, and I'm like, okay, how can we get more people like her, or more people that are not of color, speak up? A lot of times we need them to ask themselves, okay, how are we responding to situations when, don't respond just because I'm Black and I'm standing there. Respond when I'm not there. And that's what's going to change. Like you talked about changing hearts. People need to start realizing that stuff is not funny. I'm sitting here looking through social media, and I know a lot of people tell me stop reading the comments, Latasha, but it's hard. And people are just nasty and you're like, what is wrong with you? Like, Jesus needs to do something with your heart. I just want to throw Jesus oil on everybody or something, but it's just really hard. I'm like, we need people to understand that we're human too. Just because I'm darker than you doesn't make me any less than anyone else. And so, it gets frustrating, but I have to keep those 3 C's together. Because if I miss one of them, it won't be good. it just won't be. So I'm glad that, like I said, I'm glad we're having this conversation, especially when it comes to race and obviously policing. I do understand, that I can say that I have seen some change. I think the problem that we're going to continue to see is not that y'all are feeling like you're hitting a reset button. It's more of we as African Americans, it's bigger than just policing. Yep. And so you can make some changes, but if we don't, and then some of these changes we don't see or know. And so if we don't see it consistently, that's the problem. And people got to have those background conversations.
No, I agree, and I think communication is a huge piece.
Exactly.
I mean, like, you see the 8 Can't Wait, all the campaign that's gone around, to change police departments around the nation. Fort Worth already did 7 of them, of the 8 Can't Wait. I mean, when you look for good departments, by and large, Fort Worth PD does it better than 99% of the departments out there. It's 90% better trained with more hours than most out there. It's just not communicated. That's a
part
big
of-
piece. And I like what you said, that there's so much more than just policing. And it seems like this is just the most visible piece right here, but the conversation has to be said about everything. I mean, there's racial injustice in, the healthcare system. There's racial injustice in
Criminal courts.
Criminal courts, in the school system. I mean, it's everywhere. And I think right now the spotlight's on policing because of George Floyd. Because of the murder of George Floyd. But that's one piece that I want to figure out, or that I'm interested in figuring out, is how to make officers feel like they're not being blamed for all of society's ills. They're not being blamed for racism themselves. And that's one thing that I hope to learn how we can do it together, is make officers feel like they're not.
Yeah, but along with what you're saying there, the fact that you were able to say it so matter-of-factly, which makes sense because you're right about it, about the racism permeates every aspect of society. The problem we're having is that that's not believed. That's where racism is living, in the fact that that's not believed. The word white privilege has been thrown around so much in the last 5 years. Robin DiAngelo did a phenomenal job writing the book White Fragility. So these terms are getting into our lexicon. But there's still not a day that I engage white people to where I don't want to get someone that says, "Oh, white privilege is not a real thing." Like, yeah, I mean, that incident you're talking about, race wasn't involved. Like, when I left the house, I literally was having a conversation about someone who couldn't see race being involved in George Floyd's death. Like, they just really couldn't see it. It's unfortunate that it happened. It's unfortunate that these officers did that, but I don't think it was necessarily because he was black. So it's this lived experience that I know when me and Lou are chopping it up, that we see this, right? We're not crazy, but as matter of factly as we can say that here, and we know that all of us believe that this thing is real, there are too many that really believe we're talking about a myth. Of something that really
racism is a book, and that's one thing for me that I find. It's like I have to speak to this boogeyman. Like when I'm talking to people, I'm like, yeah, you say there's racism out there, and then what? Look, and then they point to you. Well, you're successful. You did a good job. How is there? And my success is in spite of.
Come on, man.
In spite of. So background on me, I grew up all over the world, okay? Trinidad and Tobago, Cairo, Egypt. I landed in Fort Worth, Texas at 17 years old. I've been here since. Now, when I was 17 years old, walking through Hewlin Mall, and I'm in Macy's, whatever, department store, and I noticed somebody just like following me. And I'm like, what's going on? And it hit me at that point in time, at TCU, everything. This is what it's like to be black in America. I was like, it's like this, I felt like this weight on my shoulder. I was like, what is this backpack that I've been carrying around? And that's oppression. And it hadn't clicked because I hadn't been here for years. I'd spent my summers here in Houston and all that, but it didn't click until I'm going to a predominantly white institution. I'm going and I'm dealing with this culture shock, and I noticed that to be black in America is to be pushed like 10 steps back, and to also walk around and hold this weight every day, every single day. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. There's no break. It's just there. And me being successful, me doing all of this is in spite of that. And when you see black people in your community be successful, it's in spite of that. I'm in these rooms and able to do these different things because I've been able to acquire these different skills. Now, I should not have to have all of these different skills and check every single box to be able to be in these rooms. There should be others like me that sit at the table and are able to speak, but because the way the society has been built, that's what I have to do to be there. Yeah. And I think that's the problem. This is not made up, and that's one thing that I think is really important. That's why I like to build relationships. Because once I built this relationship, and something happens, I was in Portland, Oregon. I'm chilling in Portland, Oregon. Somebody drives by and throws a container of whatever of a Subway cup on me. Yells the N-word and speeds off. I went to Facebook, and I specifically went to Facebook and typed it up so that my friends knew that, hey, in 2017, this is still happening, and this is happening to our boy Lou. And my friends know. They go, but Lou, he's one of the good ones. He's a good one. Well, why would they do this to Lou? But that's the part about also building that relationship. I'm not out to make white people feel guilty, okay? I'm not out to do that. I'm just out I want to have the same exact chance. Yeah. I want everybody to have the same exact chance. And that's it. I'm not here to take away. I'm not here for, to take scholarships away, whatever they want to tell you. It's not about that. It's about when I'm born in my color skin, I have the same exact opportunity as somebody who's born of a lighter skin color has. And that's it.
And I think that one thing you said, man, is key. And I think really in a city like Fort Worth, is relationships. I just think the breakdown in ethnicities in our city just doesn't allow the natural flow of different ethnicities to do life, to rub shoulders, to be in the workplace together. And I think when you don't have those natural relationships, you are either discipled by what news channel that you watch, and you create these biases about a subgroup of people. And if we're honest, our American history has really been one-sided. It's left a lot of the gross brutality things. It's left out the systematic approach to oppressing people of color, and we've elevated another subgroup. And so in our society, it's allowed us to, in some ways, devalue the life of people of color. And I think so often, if that's the lack of imagery on TV, if that's a lack of leadership, seeing someone that looks like you, Black Panther was my son's hero. I didn't get a Black Panther growing up. There was no a superhero, a comic hero that looked like me. And he runs around, and Black Panther's my hero, and that's his hero. But I just think of just not having relationship kills us, and then it makes us afraid to have these conversations. And in a city like Fort Worth, you have to be intentional about pursuing relationships across the line. And you have to put down your fear, your biases, your lack of understanding, because if we don't, the silence in that moment, it's almost kind of like Adam was present when Eve ate of that fruit. At any moment, he could have spoken up and prevented the downfall of sin and depravity that fell upon this earth. That silence, that we remain silent to the injustices in our society, allows that systematic racism to continue to give birth to generation after generation. Yeah. But I believe that we can truly get to the root of that and begin to kill the seed of racism in our country.
Yeah, so proximity, it breeds perspective. Like, you can't see what I can't see what you see unless I'm near to you, right? Like if I'm close to you, then I can a little bit experience what you experience, or a little bit see what you see. And so relationships are so huge in that, especially somebody from I'm not Black, I'm not a person of color, and so for me to try to experience what Lou would experience in 2017, I just have to know him. I would have to have that relationship with him so I could see then what he sees. But then what? So like, what kind of relationships are going to breed that kind of awareness, that kind of heart change or mindset shift, to where because we see people of different colors all the time, right? Maybe even work with people of different colors all the time. Like, Melissa, what do those relationships have to be, as somebody that's not Black, not white, but you've had to, you know, learn these things. What kind of relationships will it take to begin to grow in just our awareness and understanding of racial issues?
Yeah, I think that, you know, I think proximity is really important, and we talk about that at the net quite a bit, that because we're in proximity to people, you know, I don't have to have been sex trafficked to be in proximity to sex trafficking victims and to advocate for them and make my life's work out of it. And I think something that I'm learning right now in this season is that there's to me, a stark contrast in how I view these issues based on kind of two different tiers of response. And I think initially, and I sat under Q's leadership for a while when he was one of my small group leaders at our church, and there was just a season of life where it sort of, things were just breaking my heart. I'm like, this is so sad, this is egregious, these things shouldn't be happening. And then, you know, the hashtags, it was from Trayvon Martin all the way up to that season of life where I was really agreeing that things were really sad and really bad and that they shouldn't happen again to anybody because people are made in God's image. But what I'm realizing now is that just agreeing that things are sad, just wanting it to be better doesn't actually change anything. My sadness and my grief is literally the first step, but it's not the step, because what I'm realizing now is like, oh, my Black brothers and sisters live in trauma every single day because of experiences that they've had because of their aunties or their kids or their fear for their children or their wives crying or being followed and seen as a certain way. And I'm living in comfort. And I'm just sad that those things are happening and I want them to change, but there is no discomfort in my life in order to see that change happen for the people that are living in trauma. And so I think one of the things that I'm realizing in this season, and having watched, I did watch, you know, the Ahmaud Arbery video. I did watch all 9 minutes of George Floyd's video as I'm weeping in my living room and my heart broke into a million pieces thinking these people, what I was crying over for the first time wasn't me being sad necessarily just about George Floyd, and that I was thinking of the people in my life, if they watch that video, what it will do to them and what it will do to our community and the ripple effects that it will have on the people who are having to yet again sit under another trauma. And so something I'm trying to personally grow in right now is stepping into that discomfort and being a better ally for the people around me who are hurting. And I think that looks like not being so fragile. And I want to be someone that the Black and brown people in my life do not have to edit themselves for. They can be angry if they need to. They can be however they're feeling, their full selves that God created them to be, and the oppression and the hurt and the trauma they've experienced, they can be their full selves. And I think one of the reasons why, for me at least, it's hard to hear even what Manny was saying, that there's training and there's reform and things happening, but there's a little bit of a fragility, I think, that still exists within the police department that makes it feel like that it's not a good old boys club, because you're saying that it's not, and I hear that, but the kind of we look out for each other mentality feels reminiscent of like all white boardrooms, or why policing exists to begin with, or the redlining and the white communities that protected their communities, like you protect your own. And I think what you're doing is amazing because you want change, you want to see reform, you want hearts to be changed. But I think the problem with that is that if it's met with any kind of fragility, any kind of sensitivity, like even the sensitivity that I'm dealing with right now, I've had to overcome that in order, like, be the punching bag, I guess, for the first time, and not let other people still be disadvantaged while I'm advantaged. And so if things offend me, that I work through it on my own, and I say, why is that? And so I think even as you're talking, Manny, I was just thinking, it's hard for me, it's probably hard for some people who are listening to this to hear, well, there's trainings done and things have happened, because it still feels like there's a sense of fragility in that. Like, don't accuse us of something when we're watching things happen and play out. And so that's just something that I'm working on, because I think the proximity thing is important, because if you have proximity to people, then it goes beyond just feeling sad for people. And at the same time, there are white people in proximity to black people, black spouses, black children, black friends, who are still just kind of shrugging their shoulders, hoping for the best. And I think it can't stop there.
Right.
Agreed.
And, oh,
Go ahead,
and
Natasha.
to add to what you're saying, I mean, I'm seeing people talking about, property. We have people dying. Property has insurance, and so people are having conversations about, oh, someone spray painted this, and more than likely it was not anybody that was out there protesting that was doing those things. But instead of trying to focus on the bigger issue of why someone would try to change the subject, or I call it a diversion of the situation, which is constantly happening in our city. People all over, constantly talking about, well, look, somebody did this to this. And I'm like, who cares? There's somebody dying. And then the person that probably did it, which we've seen, people getting arrested, and they don't look like they belong to the movement. So what are we really trying to accomplish here? Are we talking about what's really going on? Or are we going to keep diverting and saying, oh, well, they're rioting and blah, 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 instead of trying to see what really is the problem? If we can sit down and have the conversation and focus on the problem, then we can make change.
But let's think about what the problem is, though, sister. So part of the problem is not viewing one's humanity. And that takes way more than the conversation. So,
Yeah.
So Chauncey and Jim, Mel, y'all are right when you're talking about the proximity in the relationship. I wholeheartedly endorse that. I mean, that is a wonderful tool that can really help to dive into empathy. But in addition to that, it shouldn't even have to take that, though.
Right.
Because so let's think about 9/11 for a moment, right? When 9/11 happened and those towers got hit, everything that I was privy to, and I was in Prairie View, Texas at the time, right, in undergrad at Prairie View A&M University. Everything that I was privy to, everyone was devastated that these towers got hit. Everyone was like, oh my God, how is this happening right now?
Right.
Everyone was seeking justice.
Right.
So much, and everyone got so invested, including the United States of America, got so invested that we still ain't brought all the troops home yet from that act. And we killed the person that we said that supposedly was the offender that made it all happen.
Right.
But that's how much investment we had when something happened to ours. Because it was an affront to us, right?
Yeah.
We're not viewing racism that way as a society, unfortunately. It ain't happening to us, it's happening to them.
Yeah.
And the them is not even fully human, and it's been ingrained in us since the very foundation of this country, when we have legal documentation that founded us that says that we're 3/5 of a person. And we still ain't jumped that hurdle all the way yet, because you gotta understand that even me at 38 years old, I am the first generation in my family to have full rights endowed upon me. I'm the first person in my family that actually was born under the Voting Rights Act. Not my mom, not my grandma, and I ain't that old, right?
Right.
My sons are just second generation gonna be able to have full voting rights restored under them? Like, we're not that far removed from it. And so the thing is, we went from 3/5 of a person to all of this fight, to Reconstruction eras, to civil rights, to just now in my mom's lifetime, and now me being the first generation to be able to have all my rights and citizenry bestowed upon me. And the thing is, we still haven't hopped the hurdle of, you have to see me as a human. Because when you see something happen to a human, empathy kicks in. I have never been a victim of domestic violence, not one time in my life. My mom didn't get beat, thank God, any of that. But when Tasha tells me about what happens in her story, when she tells me about the people that she works with, my heart cries out and it devastates me. When Mel tells me about the people she's working with at the net, even though I've never been a victim of human trafficking, don't know anybody personally that has, other than people I have to work with, my heart cries out. And I want to do anything that she would ask me to do to make sure that I'm helping. But yet when a black person gets killed on TV, on camera, it's a 24-hour news cycle, it's a social media post, and we're on to the next thing. We haven't fully grasped the humanity yet of our blackness. So it's weaponized against us, it's made us look inhumane, and the world can continue to function as if we're really not a part of this America. And the thing is, we really do live in two Americas, and that part can't be seen as well.
Two distinct two Americas. You know, I'll kind of bring it into real perspective. I go out party, 7th Street, Uptown Dallas. I would always pack 2 outfits. I would pack the outfit for when the bouncer says, "Nah, man, you can't get in with those shoes." And I'd pack the other outfit that I would be like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna put my church shoes on, and they'll let me in then." But it's 2. I would see me and all my friends dressed the same exact way. Same way. A lot of times my shoes cost more than dude's whole outfit. But no, hey man, we're not doing that tonight. We're not doing Jordans, but we're doing Vans. We're not doing polo boots, but we're doing cowboy boots. We're not doing, but it's ingrained into our society to a certain extent where, you know, it's sad. Like it's sad that like this is the world. This is everyday life. Now it got to the point where, you know, me and my friends, we would laugh, make a joke about it. It's not funny. It'd be like, "Bro, you didn't bring your second outfit, dog. You didn't bring your second outfit." It's funny to us because that's what it is, but it's not funny. It's not real. It's like it's sad that, you know, like you said, after a certain amount of time, it's on to the next thing. But for us, that's like the way to cope.
The next thing is me.
Yeah, the next thing is me, and that's
You know what I mean?
another. I don't know how you can't look at this and say, "Do you not see me on the ground with the knee on my neck? Do you not see Lou?" Like and a lot of times
the
I don't.
question is, do they see you in the first place?
Yeah.
So they
Right.
can even see you down there.
Right. And you know, when I started making music, the first thing I thought about. I was like, I want to bring people together. That was it. I want to bring people together. I don't care if I have a white fan base. I don't care if I have a black fan base, brown, gay, straight. I don't care. I want to bring people together. Because when you can bring people together, you can see me as a person. I'm a human. You hear my songs, you hear my stories. I tell you stories about my life. So you can see that. Because inevitably, I'm gonna have to face being black in America at some point in time. And you'll be able to see, Lou, what's going on. So I mean, it's just, it's a crazy.
Well, you know, from a police officer's perspective, you know, getting to George Floyd, I don't know a single police officer personally, and I know a lot of them, obviously, that could watch that video without screaming at their phone or their computer. Get the hell off of them. What are you doing? I don't know a single person, I don't know a single police officer who could watch that video and say, "What the hell are you doing? Get off of them." Not a single person. And so the officers are watching that and they're seeing it too. And they feel the exact same way. So that, and you know, as odd as it sounds, that's unifying. You know what I mean? People of all persuasions, people of all colors see that and they know it's wrong. You know it's wrong. Right or wrong or taught whatever your child, everyone knows that's wrong. Everyone knows that's murder. Everybody understands it. And I get there's a different perspective whenever you say, "Look, that man looks like me." You know, because had it been a Mexican guy, maybe I'd say that man looks like me. Maybe it'd have been different. But to me, the gut punch was the exact same. Because then I said, you know what? That's a human being. And he's sitting on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
But see, Manny, that's what has to happen. Is that because I wholeheartedly believe you, right? That was a good punch to you. The problem that we had in the past, and somewhat fortunately with George Floyd, is a little different, just a little. But the problem we've had in the past is that when we're sitting at home and we're sitting in our living room, we're seeing this play out before our eyes, and we see the atrocity happening, knowing the injustice is happening right here in front of us. We then pan to the news station that has the police chief or has head of POA, and not saying you personally, but just, you know, from whatever city it may be at the time, and it's always, we're doing an investigation. We have to get all the facts together first. And for court purposes, absolutely, I get that. Yeah, everyone's innocent until proven guilty. Yeah, they do calls in court and all that good stuff. But the humanity of us is looking at a video before George Floyd. He ain't the first one where we saw. I mean, come on. In my lifetime and back in the 92, 93, Rodney King happened. To where he's beaten. It's 5-6 officers. They got billy clubs. I'm seeing them kill this black man. He's sitting right here and it's happening, and they all walked away scot-free. And the thing is, we don't get to hear the perspective of the humanity of officers in that moment. And that's what's needed when we're talking about healing and unity. So I absolutely understand the aspect of when an investigation is happening, you can't speak to facts. When that really is part of, making sure that everyone got their fair share and all that good stuff. But the people need to hear the humanity of officers when it happened, not that we sitting here crazy.
Well, and I'll tell you this, just to bring it from macro kind of to micro back to Fort Worth, Texas. That's one thing that I think our association has always had a problem with, is where you rush out and you'll defend obvious bad behavior. You'll say, man, we're going to defend him because he's got a uniform on, right? Obvious bad behavior. Now this POA, every single member of this POA is absolutely perfectly clear where Maynard and Meredith stands. And they know that if they want someone who's going to go bluster and beat their chest in the media, I'm not the guy. Because ever since I've been the president, not once have I come out and defended bad behavior. Not one time. I've come out in the media and I've said, look, this officer deserves due process like everybody else. And that's the statement. They deserve due process. But you cannot defend bad behavior. You can't do it because that encourages bad behavior. So you can't do it. So we're not a protectionist union, and I'm speaking Fort Worth specific. Sure. Those Minneapolis guys have their own problems. I'm speaking Fort Worth specific. But I absolutely understand your perspective, and this is circa 2016 on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of, well, wait a second, I remember this, and I remember this, and I remember this, and I remember this. There's a lot of that. And I have officers right now that are saying, Manny, we listen, like we're listening, we're reforming, we're training, we're all open, we hate racism. Officers are telling me that now. Why are they still protesting? And I said, you don't understand. For so long, exactly like Lou said, for so long, we've been saying it, and nothing's changed. Right now there's a moment, and things are changing. So everybody's afraid it's just gonna slip right away. You know what I mean? And it's just gonna go away. So then you have to over push and say, no, we have to keep it going. We gotta keep on going.
Right.
Because if you don't, when's the moment? And we all understand. Changing society, it's gonna happen through attrition, ultimately. You know what I mean? Turning a cruise ship like this, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. You've got police officers that were here 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that things were totally different than they are today. They wouldn't survive today, And we talk about policing being rooted in racism, and I hear a lot of people deny that. And they say, no, never. Not rooted in racism. Never. We're not racist, because they're looking at their lens, right? But it's an unequivocal fact that before Jim Crow, there was not equal protection under the law. That's 50 years old, That's it, 50 years. That's how long there's been equal protection.
Yeah, there needs to be a ground that the city of Fort Worth is growing in, right? A new dirt, and weeds are pulled, and there's new cultivation of new works, and I think what we're saying is that that's just not there yet, right? That's just not happened yet. We haven't turned it up yet, and gotten rid of all of the, 92, 93 wasn't that long ago.
Right.
Your son is only going to be second generation voter, right? So things like that, like that's not that long ago, but we're in an age where everything just seems so fast and quick, and just that stuff feels a long time ago, but it's not. But I wanted to say this. I wanted to kind of transition from and we can come back to it if we need to, the police conversation to some other things. So yesterday, a friend of mine, he's a fellow pastor, Doug Logan, he addressed the United States Senate Judiciary Committee as a part of a panel on police use of force and community relations. And he said this, I thought it was interesting. He said, we need to reconsider our fundamentally flawed reliance on the police to fix upstream problems. Right? For the police will never be more than a downstream solution. They are the end of the line. They are the last resort for a civilized society which, if it were filled with virtuous citizens, would need no police, and we would even have fewer laws. And so my question is just this: are we maybe asking? One could be: are we asking police to do too much in cities?
I think
right?
absolutely.
And then another question might just be: where else then should we be looking? And I'm thinking church. I'm thinking business. I'm thinking criminal courts. I'm thinking all of those kind of school board. I'm thinking of all of that. And then I got a follow-up question to that too. But let's just go. Let's just go from there.
I think it starts young. It starts in the schools. It starts at home. before you get to the schools. But
Yes.
a lot of that, if you come from a certain side of town, if you come from a different area, if you come from a place that's not, mother, father,
Right.
white picket fence, if you come from a different area, your home might be the root of why you end up where you end up. I had a
Right.
conversation the other day, and I was talking to an officer, and he says, man, it just, he called me bro, and he called me man, and he didn't call me sir. And I said, well, you're used to working up in a different area where, look, growing up in certain places, you're not taught to call anybody man, or you're not taught to call anybody sir. I mean, sometimes you just say bro or man. I mean, that's how you talk to somebody. I mean, I've been a detective and sitting in interviews, I mean, you can't get offended. That's how folks talk, I mean, in certain neighborhoods, it's how you talk to each other. And then we're talking about criminality. But you know what? That teenager, he's 14 years old, he's selling dope on the corner. Why? Because his father sold dope on the corner. I mean, he doesn't have any role models in his life. I mean, so you're judging that guy, saying he should make better choices. What choice? What choice does he have? So I think you hit it on the head when you
I
said,
think there's a lot to the humanization question. Is we aren't looking at people as humans based on their humanity, based on they're made in the image of God, but on their merits, and that's a problem. When we treat one another based on merit, which is a worldly system that we've all grown up in, and maybe even been a part of cultivating, but that's going to be a huge problem when we're looking at those different situations. But let me kind of bring it along to that. Like, if it's we're asking maybe police to do too much in a city and in a community, and we're also there's other holistic way of attacking ferociously the soil that we've been given to turn it up so we can get new fruit. So what would that look like? What does it look like in the church? What does it look like at TCU? What does it look like in the criminal court system? What does it look like in the music and arts?
Yeah.
I mean, what does that look like?
I mean, I think really, the church and nonprofit organizations, and when you were talking, I was thinking like, wow, Community Frontline does this stuff already,
Let's go, Q.
And so, being able to join forces as a community and have those conversations. I will say in Fort Worth, I've noticed that when we talk about community, a lot of people that are not of color kind of either shy away from getting together and making change, or they don't care. And so when are we going to get to the point to where they're open to joining us when we have these, like, hey, let's get together and outside of policing, but as a community, saying this is our community, black, white, purple, and green, we're all in this community. We all have to go to the same grocery stores. We all have to live together. And I think until we're able to do that, and not just have a conversation, but do action behind that, Community Frontline has cleanups and those types of things. Join in and volunteer. With Cheryl's Voice, I do events where I'm talking about domestic violence, and it's a community resource fair. Show up, say, can we volunteer of all colors and get to know people in the community. Don't just stay on your side of town. And I grew up in Fort Worth, and there has been times where, I'm stop by. Matter of fact, that was just this year when a police officer, I was leaving, and I didn't even tell anyone this. And my friend, if she's listening, she's gonna be like, "Oh, that happened." She lives in Tanglewood, and she asked me to house sit. And I was dropping something off at her house, and when I was leaving her area, I got stopped by the police, and I'm pretty sure he probably thought I stole my car or something. And first I was upset. I'm like, what the heck, he stopped me? I know I'm not speeding, da da da. And I knew once I saw he was a white officer, I said, wow, this is still happening in 2020. This is still happening. And I told him where I was doing and why I was in the neighborhood and yada yada yada. And it was almost like I took a block, and it bothered me. And I'm hoping that one day we get to a point to where if you see a black person driving a nice car, they didn't steal it, maybe they got a job and they can afford it. Or if you see them in a neighborhood that may not be a lot of black people that live in, maybe they actually live there, or they know a friend that lives there. So it's like in Fort Worth, we have to get to the point to where we see us as, like you said, human. We are human. I work every day. If you saw my schedule, you'd probably be like, whoa, she does a lot. I don't ask anybody to give me anything. I don't steal anything. I should be able to go to Neiman's and Nordstrom's and not have someone follow me. And so it doesn't just take us. It also takes people that are working in these stores. You know, check your biases when you see one of us in the store. You know, whether I'm dressed in a baseball hat or a hoodie or whatever, or if I'm dressed up. I shouldn't have to be dressed up all the time. And that's one of the things as a black woman. You know, I try to make sure I'm always presentable because I'm very cautious about, you know, how am I going to be perceived when I go into a store, especially if I'm going to go to Clearfork. I'm definitely not going to wear sweats and, you know, a backpack, because I definitely don't want anyone calling the cops on me because they assume that a black woman who dressed down in yoga pants and a tank top, but you know, my friend Melissa here could probably wear yoga pants and a tank top and have her little mom bun going, and they won't say anything. And so, you know, but I have to dress up like I'm going to church, you know, anytime I go somewhere. And so, you know, it's something that we have to, you know, check your bias. And if you have a friend and you're with them and they're like, oh, we got to follow this person, you need to tell them, hey, that's just because she's black, what we're following her for. I probably spend more money than a lot of other people in there in those stores. So we need to start.
Nobody doubts your shopping acumen.
Yeah.
We just,
And y'all
we know
talking
you're
about
the-
like wearing stuff to church. I just wanted, like, Lou, you can wear whatever shoes you want to my church.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Right.
Whatever,
I mean,
whatever.
you know-
The J's, you can bring the
I
J's.
appreciate it.
Yeah, you know, it's like we have to get past the stereotypes. We should be able to wear whatever, our hair in whatever, you know, style. You know, a lot of, I work in criminal courts, and a lot of times I see people's eyes if someone has like an afro or their hair. It's not my particular style, but just because one of my sisters, you know, have their hair in a natural state, they shouldn't be looked at differently just because they wear their hair differently. And so people need to work on their biases and check those, and then check their friends. And that's where it starts, checking the next person when you hear and see stuff that's biased.
I like starting young. I like what you said about the community. So POA, we've got a couple programs. One of them's Cops for Kids. And the mission is to put money in the hands of cops to give to the community when they're out there. We literally give gift cards, and if an officer goes on a call and somebody's car seat got stolen or an Xbox got stolen, they can literally take that family, go buy shoes, go buy an Xbox, whatever, if they're on a burglary. And that's the mission, is to try to connect the police officers in their community. And that's something not the department thought of, that's the POA. We're trying to do that. And also the Read to Win program, I'm sure everybody's heard about Read to Win. Well, we were asked, and we support that program financially, and Pastor Cole, we were talking about it. And Pastor Cole told me, he says, you know, we've got these officers that go to this place, and we just like officers to get involved. I said, well, Pastor Cole, you've got all the black officers going to the black schools and all the white officers going to the white schools. I said, now I get that to a point. You want, you know, positive role models, but at the same time, what if you put a white officer in a school with a whole bunch of black kids, and first of all those black kids see that white officer and say, oh, that's a nice cop. We're not going to be
Depends on the officer, man.
But at the
Depends
same
on the
time,
officer,
Q, at the same time,
Yeah.
that officer says, well, look, these black kids are just like my kids.
Hopefully.
They're running up to me, they're giving me a hug.
Well, that's
No,
the
well,
hope.
they got to volunteer for the program, all right?
Yeah.
But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe swap it around instead of doing the things we've always been done, where we say, hey, let's go back to borderline segregation. You know what I mean? No.
Yeah.
Mix it up. Get the
But-
spoon in there.
Well, that's the thing. So one, you know, let's dispel the myth too that Fort Worth is not segregated, because it absolutely is. And you're from here. You grew up on the north side.
Well, there's
And when you-
6 different cities within the city.
You know what I mean? And where you grew up, I'm pretty sure most of the folks look like you on the north side.
Every
Right?
single one of them.
Same thing with me in the 6, right? Everybody look like me. So and it's still to this day. So Fort Worth is absolutely segregated. So
Yeah,
that
that's
part.
what I was just
But
saying.
so along with that though, getting back to Jim's original question about do we ask law enforcement to do too much? Absolutely, way too much. And so that's what the cry, the rallying cry about defund the police has been. And the defund aspect is the triggering aspect where people cringe and can't get it all defund. And all I mean, and they only mean it in a literal sense of taking resources away from, but taking those resources and placing them elsewhere. And the thing is, so it's not to say that law enforcement is not needed. Violent crimes will happen. If somebody, you know, Tasha's dealing with people all the time. If somebody's calling and saying he's beating me right now, he has my kid locked in the room, whatever, an officer needs to get over there and intervene as quickly as possible. It might have to be armed in a situation like that because it's dangerous. But to hear that someone is having a mental health breakdown, a mental health professional needs to be there. To hear that somebody is destitute, that's social work. To hear there's a call about homelessness, then we should have a homelessness division that's handling those things, and not armed law enforcement that's going to handle these things. And so that's what we have to get. We have to get to this point to where we actually can reimagine what this whole thing is supposed to be like, and stop leaving it the status quo. If we have the true historical reference of understanding that policing in the first place was built out of a system of white supremacy, it was to protect property and keep property in place, including black people being in the property at the time. If we understand that's the history and heritage that we still have yet to get away from, then we got to reimagine saying, okay, what if we revamp that whole thing? It doesn't mean there's not good cops that we could say, yeah, maybe you could be in the school or maybe you can handle these particular calls, but calling a cop for everything, we're doing it wrong when we're doing it. And that's not even fair to y'all as officers.
Well, and I think as a tagline, as a global tagline, the defund the police, it's wholly wrong. There's probably departments of 2 or 3 guys. I mean, there's 18,000 departments out here. Some of them have 10 officers, some of them have 1,700. And so the tagline, the one-size-fits-all approach, just isn't going to work. And you look at Fort Worth specific, we've got a mental health unit that actually rides with social workers, and they respond to those things. And we've had that for a couple of years. They do phenomenal work.
Right.
We've got a homeless outreach unit, a HOPE team, that's what they do. They go out there and they provide services, and they're partnered. I sit on the board of Salvation Army. They partner with us, and they go out there and they do those services. But I agree with you. I think that, but the answer in my perspective is not take resources away. It's just give more resources. Put these places in, because what I see is our cops right now, they're literally working 30 calls a day. So they're going call to call to call to call to call. When is there time to stop by if Lou's walking on the street and say, hey, what's going on? I'm Officer Smith. Nice to meet you, man. You know, when is there time for that? There's not. He's running and gunning. And if you're driving and he pulls you over, maybe they're doing a violent crime detail, instead of stopping and saying, hey, we were told to stop every single car in this neighborhood because you've had 5 shootings in your area, sir, and I'm just making sure we're not looking for you. Here's my card. Call me if there's anything specific. Instead of that, the officer's just like, you're not who I'm looking for. Get out of here. Right? That's the encounter. Totally different. But it's because officers, there's not enough of them. You know, I mean, there's,
Sure.
and so from our perspective, we're like, man, folks are already shorthanded. We're already limited in resources. Sure. We already don't have near the training we should have. You know, to accomplish. I mean, our academy should be 2 years long to deal with all the demands for officers.
It should be. Yeah.
You know, and so we're all saying the same things. Right. You know what I mean?
But when we talk about resources, though, those resources not necessary. The resources that can be more, when we're talking about giving law enforcement more resources, though the resources can be more avenues to take away from those responsibilities that you may have as officers.
Training, mental wellness,
you know
that type of thing. Yeah.
That's the resources, not pumping more money in, because when we pump more money in, instead of seeing the program, and not saying that what you're not doing in Fort Worth and everything, but what it seems like we're seeing when we're pumping more money into law enforcement is more tear gas, more riot gear, more war type materials to be able to police a community when this is your citizenry. We're not warring up against another country to where we need to buy an additional tank to be able to take care of riots. You know what I mean? Like, so if we see this money getting pumped into that, that's where an issue is, instead of understanding that, like I said, for the benefit of all, including officers. Yeah. Take some of those responsibilities away and make it to where you have more partnerships where you can, as many say, hey, you know what, that particular issue is not a law enforcement problem. I know I can call such and such and refer that one, and that will be taken care of, instead of an officer being in danger or a civilian being in danger because the officer had to come out.
Yeah.
Right. Especially in our city, I don't like he was saying, all the tanks and all that stuff. I mean, we're in Fort Worth, really. Like, you know, all that power and tanks and all these things. When are we needing that in our city?
We say that, but Fort Worth, I mean, they've got a couple armored vehicles. They don't have tanks. They've got armored vehicles. But when we talk about gearing up for the protest, every single officer, when you say the word protest, you know what it goes to? It goes to 7-7, where 5 police officers were shot in Dallas at a Black Lives Matter protest. 5 police officers were killed and more citizens almost injured. And that's exactly where their mind goes. It's like PTSD for them, you know? I mean, they go back to that and say, man, we have to be prepared just in case, because those folks were not prepared. I mean, the officers were running around with their pistols like this, and you saw after that what happened. There were influxes of donations to the departments for those heavy vests and all that. It came because everybody said, man. But
what happened was that the world activated when 5 cops died.
Yeah.
Right.
500 black men died when you had to activate.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the problem. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So because those officers' lives mean everything. Matter of
Right.
fact, I was still in partnership at the Paradise Church at the time. I preached that Sunday
Right.
when all that happened, and my heart was heavy. And we made sure to pay homage to those officers
Right.
and everything because their lives matter immensely.
Right.
The rallying cry right now is that as much as we can get behind that sentiment and understand how much their life matter, can you understand that Trayvon Martin's life mattered?
Right.
George Floyd matters. Like, he matters just as much as Zapparippa that died as well. You know what I mean? Like, that's where we got to get to in humanity, to where we're not pulling one over another because of the profession, because of the level of education, definitely not because of the skin color.
Right.
But a human being died, and all of us should be weeping and mourning behind that and activating to say another one won't die if we can prevent it. And we don't have enough of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I guess the officers see, 95% of their day is spent dealing with robberies, homicides, accidents with dead children. I mean, they see these horrific
Oh,
things.
absolutely.
And then that's in their minds, they're seeing all of those things time and
Yes.
time and time again. And so that scars them so much, and it desensitizes them, so to speak. So whenever they see a tragedy occur, they don't feel it as deep, or they probably do feel it even deeper. It's repressed, And that's why we want mental wellness. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we've talked about
And that's
the
what we
same
put
exact
resources into. You know what I mean? When we talk about giving resources,
100%.
a cop had to go see something that horrific.
100%.
They should be able to receive all the resources they need to bounce back from that, because humans shouldn't have to endure that.
100%.
Right? So no, yeah,
So
that's
I
where it
want
is.
to just for time's sake, I want to kind of transition us to this kind of last moment that I want us to do, and I'm kind of like feeling. I wonder how the listeners are feeling too. Mel, I don't know, maybe like I kind of feel like the up and down, the push and the pull a little bit of all of this, and I just think that's natural when it comes to this kind of discussion. And there's so much. It's such there's a holistic, systemic reality to what we're talking about, and it feels overwhelming, just to be honest. Like, it feels overwhelming, and yet at the same time, I'm coming from a Christian faith perspective, a Christian pastor. I have a lot of hope for the city and what humanity can do, especially at least in my opinion, compelled by the good news of Jesus Christ and what he's doing. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to ask, hopefully every one of you can give maybe just a minute or two of, when you look at Fort Worth in 10 years, when you look at Fort Worth in 20 years, what does it look like? What does she look like if we've led out and we've started to, this full-pronged approach at all of this, and we've seen the people of the city and the people of God and the people who care get after it in all the ways in which we're called to do, and hopefully we're informing and inspiring people to do right now. What does it look like? What is your vision for Fort Worth when it comes to racial reconciliation and the injustices that we're seeing?
I think something that I think of, just a hope, as I'm diving deeper into the historical landscape of the things that we're talking about. And of course I knew of some things, but the deeper that I'm diving into the years and years and years and years of things that have happened historically, I think that my hope would be that it's no longer your burden and your burden and your burden, but that there would be a group of people who haven't experienced that our family members have been voting, have been buying homes, have had all of those things afforded to them since the beginning, because they had the financial and political way to be able to do that because of slavery. Anyways, I think that it would become our burden, that it would become the burden of people who are not Black. I think that it would become the burden of the church, and that we would take on this issue, and we would do it with the humility and just the posturing of learning and listening and amplifying your voices, and not necessarily, for me, not being an expert on this issue, but looking to the experts of racism. I can't say what racism is or isn't, but you can, because you've experienced it and your family has experienced it, and you don't want your kids to experience it. And so your voice needs to be amplified over and over again, but I don't think the burden, the exhaustion needs to keep going back on you. And so I think one of my hopes is that people who look like me would just seek to take on that burden for a little bit, that we would get uncomfortable and that we would be the ones to, I don't know, carry that weight for you. You know, Lou said he had that backpack on when he was in Hewlin Mall. It's like, oh, you realized I've been living with this heavy backpack my whole life, and I don't know what it looks like, but metaphorically, I think we should be coming up alongside people. Give me your backpack. It's my turn to take that backpack and let me help bring about the change so that your kids don't have to wear that backpack. And for me, my daughter, I think something I just hope for her is that she sees people who look like her. There's all kinds of Black Panthers, and in our home, I think where it starts, if you look like me and you're listening, I think it starts in our house. We read so many books, and I was telling Q right before this, my daughter, she's 2, she got her hair braided today, which I accidentally sent in a group text, but everyone could see how cute she was. She got her hair braided today for the first time, and for my 4-year-old to tell me that she wants her hair to look braided, wants her hair to look beautiful, like Justice said, she wants her hair to get braided. I think that standard of beauty, setting that tone, starts in our houses with our kids, so that the future that they both live in doesn't look like what it looks like in 2020. That new soil has come up, and then I think as a Christian, I have all the equipment that I need, all the equipping, I have everything I need to do the things I'm saying, because I have a God who left comfort, and he left heaven to come down to earth, to enter into brokenness, enter into the mess. He said, in this world you will have trouble, but I will be with you. He left all of the comfort to be with us, to make sure that we weren't marching through this life alone. And I think it's time, at least for people who look like me, to do that in a really specific and tangible way so that the burden doesn't land on you.
That's good.
I think in 20 years, I like that. I like that the burden's ours and it's not our kids. You know, and I don't want my daughters to grow up. I've got 3 of them. I don't want them to grow up and think that they're 3 little brown girls in the world. You know, I want them to grow up and think they're 3 little princesses, because that's all they know right now. They don't know about racism. They don't know anything about it. They're just 3 little girls that don't see color, because that's how they're raised. You know, they're raised around they have friends of every different faith, every different color, and I don't want them to ever have to worry about it. You know, and that's the vision, right? That nobody ever has to worry about it. So maybe that's the blessing of the moment. And earlier, and I think it was you who said you wish we could just skip 2020. And you know what? Sometimes I wish I could too, but sometimes I hope maybe we don't. Maybe 2020 is necessary.
Indeed.
Maybe 2020 is necessary to push the ball into the goalpost, right?
Right.
Maybe we're halfway, maybe we're on the 10-yard line. Maybe this is the kick. Maybe 2020 is necessary to get it there, right?
All right.
And it's not going to happen in 2020, but it's going to keep on pushing. But I can tell you this, 2021 will never be the same. I mean,
2020 is a fire.
The world will never be the same.
It's a fire that
after
refines,
2021.
man. Yeah.
So, like I said, I hope in 2020 or in 20 years that my children look back and they're proud of everything that we accomplished, our generation accomplished, but they don't have that burden. They don't have the feeling. They say, hey, that's just something that happened.
Yeah.
You know, that's history, and it's awesome
Yeah.
because I got friends.
I think about it, and I was going on a jog, and at the end of my jog, I just started crying. And I started crying because I thought, this is what my dad dealt with.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is what my granddad, who fought in World War II, my great-granddad fought in World War I. They risked their life, they came back and they were still niggers. Like that's what they were. I'm sitting here in a different way, and I'm dealing with that same feeling. And, you know, I come to terms with where I'm just running a race, and I'm gonna run it the best way I can, and I'm gonna pass that baton off to the next generation. Now, what does that look like? I want it to look the best it can. I want them to not have to deal with it. But until we violently, and when I say the word violent, I mean like we confront it, it's not gonna happen. Conversations like this are great conversations, but one thing I say is, if you start with love, right? You start with God, okay? You open your heart, okay? You educate yourself, all right? That's a big part. Educate yourself, all right? Use your voice and then take action. Those 5 steps, then we're going somewhere.
Yeah.
But you got to start with love, And that I think that's what this conversation is. We got to start with love, humanity, and there's no telling what can happen if you start with love.
Yeah.
All right, so for me, I would love to paint this picture of this like utopia where all of our kids look we're all mixed babies in the United States, looking all kind of like, I'd love to paint this utopia, but in 20 years, I don't, but you know, we've got to start with love, and I think that's something that we have to confront for sure.
I think my hope during this time and during 2020, I do think none of this is no surprise to God. I think for me, I think this would be a year that number one that we would learn to listen. I think we as people struggle to listen, and I think we struggle to hear the pain of those who are saying, "I'm in pain." I hope we will be a people that will learn, that we'll look at how those who are going before us dropped the ball, that sin ran rapid, that we put the value of individuals who were created in the image of God behind other things. And I hope we will learn to recognize that. I hope we will lament that this is painful. This conversation is painful. That we live in a world that is broken, that is fallen, and it is painful to do that. And then I think we love that at the essence of who we are, that God first loved us, that He exemplified that love through His Son, through Jesus Christ, in order that we can even recognize love. And then I hope that we lead out the call to action. That everyone at this table and everyone who's listening, God has placed you in a sphere of influence. And if you look at a 5-mile radius of where God has placed you at, how can you make a difference in that community? That could be volunteering, that could be providing resources, that could be intentional about building relationships with people of different ethnicities, that could be going down to our offices, our legal offices, our governmental offices, and using your voice, your platform, your influence to make change, to address the issues that are going on in our society. We may not be able to change this world, but you can influence right where you're at. And one example of that, this week, we've been with each team at TCU, we've been talking about having this conversation about race and things that have been going on in our country. We get to the swim team. There's no people of color on our swim team, and the swim athletes are asking, okay, we see it, may not understand it, but we want to learn, and how can we help? And gave them example of that. 64% of African American kids cannot swim. What if you, who are swimmers, provided them the gift and teaching and passing it to a young adult, the gift of swimming? I mean, how amazing would that be for a young adult to get opportunity to hang out and teach a kid who may not have access to a swimming pool, and told them the story about Mount Gilead, that there is still to this day, the oldest African American church in Fort Worth, there is a swimming pool in the basement of that swimming pool in Fort Worth that was put there because kids of color didn't have nowhere to go to swim in public. And so all of us have an opportunity to make a difference, and that can be volunteer. If you are CEO of a company, wouldn't it be like to take a person of color and mentor them? How beautiful could that be? And so whatever you have and whatever God has placed in your hand, whatever your profession is, how can you leverage, share, invite individuals into your life in order that you can be in their life, in order that you are now invading each other's life, in those biases that this world and that society and that media has built up, that the truth and the beauty of God's diversity and the beauty of how He's made us begin to tear down, and that the essence of that, what we see is God, individuals who are created in the image of God, and that we fight for that, because that is, as beautiful as parts of all this world is, His greatest creation was people, and His Spirit lives in that. And that's what we have to fight for. We can't take sides based on our political values and anything or whatever it may be. The side is the kingdom of God. Anything apart from that is fleeting. It is kingdom of God is what we build on, and we fight as a unit, as the body of Christ, together to bring that bridge of reconciliation that God has already reconciled. But now we just don't say it, we activate it, and we go make it happen.
Absolutely.
Where you want me to go? So Yeah, beautiful sentiments, Chauncey, man. And I love what Mel Ice said, because I agree with those sentiments as well. It's you know, what I hope for in this moment is precisely what Mel Ice alluded to. But, you know, saying to my white brothers and sisters, I am hoping for self-examination in this moment. And this self-examination within our realm of Christianity, we just simply refer to it as repentance, right? Mm-hmm. We examine our sin to see where we may be sinful, so then we can now cast that thing out to turn away from it, to sin no more, mm-hmm. right? And that's the work of Christianity, is that we're constantly in that repentance trying to do that. And so if our white brothers and sisters take this time seriously at this moment to self-examine, to say, okay, where have I been racist? Where have I treated someone differently simply based upon the color of their skin? Where did I speak to them differently? Where did I treat them differently? Where did I did not interact with them the way that I should have? And if you can do that and curtail that, that is such an amazing step. But if you can do that and say you don't find anything, I'm never racist, that's great. So now that you've done the work and you figured out you're not racist, now do the self-examining of when have I been anti-racist? Mm-hmm. When have I seen these things happening around me and I did something about them? Mm-hmm. And if I didn't, then repenting of that I heard that funny, that joke that I deemed funny and I laughed along with when they were talking about another person of color. That I saw this injustice happen in front of me and I turned the other way. When I heard what happened to somebody else and I just tried to make sure I got back in my bubble and my cocoon. Mm-hmm. So you begin to examine that, and if you haven't done the work of being anti-racist, repenting of that and then turning towards what that looks like.
And then benefited from it.
And how, yeah. And then if you're not racist, and you can't see where you haven't been at where you've been anti-racist and you've done these things, then maybe that is where the problem lies. Because now you're telling us all that we're crazy. Yeah. You're telling people of color that we've made this myth up, that we live in this existence where we're wearing this backpack, and we know that not to be true. We're not crazy. We're highly intelligent. We know exactly what we're talking about, and it's a true reality that we're living in. Mm-hmm. So if that work is done, I am hopeful that so much can change. And so when I'm thinking about 2025, 2030, 2035 and on, mm-hmm. what I'm thinking about and what I'm hopeful for is that my children and your children as well, but that my boys, my two black boys, live in a world to where if they don't get a home loan, it's because simply they didn't have good credit and they didn't have enough money, mm-hmm. not because of the color of their skin. Right. To where if they do bad in school, it's because they didn't do a good job of studying. Mm-hmm. Not because the teacher decided that their work was inferior because of the color of their skin. That's what I'm hoping for, right? I'm hoping that when they pull over by law enforcement, that they get a ticket for speeding because they should be knuckleheads and shouldn't be speeding, and they get to go to court and pay their ticket, and it doesn't turn into execution on site. Hmm. That's the world I'm hoping for. And the thing is, as much as I do have to lay the burden right now on my white brothers and sisters to lead the charge within that, because you are benefiting the most from the systems, that really is where Mel Ice was talking about. It really is where all of us have to activate together. Mm-hmm. We have to be in this together if we're really going to create a society to where people really can be judged by their actions and what they're doing, but not already beginning at a deficit because of the way that they would look and how they were born. Mm-hmm. And so I am hopeful because of my belief in Christ that I do know the end of the story. I did read the end. We win. I get it, right? But they don't make the game any less pressing, right? It doesn't mean that it ain't hard. It's still the sleepless nights. And I know Jim. I know you have them, man. We've had those conversations where we just don't know. Lou, we've had them. I know we still are in this game. We're still fighting the good fight. At the end, we're hoping to hear, "Well done, thy good and faithful servant. You ran a good race. You did what I had you to do." And I'm hopeful that so many of us are going to be able to hear that. So I believe in that. And it's the last hope that I have left. And so I'm encouraging my white brothers and sisters to do that. And I'm also encouraging my white brothers and sisters that are already anti-racist in the work and doing the work, keep pushing, keep going, keep doing, because you're saving a lot of lives. Because when I sat on that couch and I saw George Floyd and I saw that video, and the vitriol and the hatred that went through my body, a Christian man saved and sanctified, one who was out here preaching the word, the one that is always being the peacekeeper. When I tell you I had violence and vitriol and hatred in my heart, and the reason why I wasn't able to go and manifest that upon anyone is because of the white people in my life who are being anti-racist and who are doing the work. So I'm telling you, you're saving lives when you do it. Wow. It means something. Keep pushing. And if you're not doing it, get in the game, because a lot of people are dying right now by your apathy.
I just want what Q said. I am blessed by the diversity of relationships that I have. I am blessed by that. I am blessed by the relationships that I have with friends of different ethnicities, that God is allowing me to love them as they love me as we enter into each other's world. And that is beautiful to me. And I think we should run to that and celebrate our differences and celebrate the diversity of who God is. And so what Q said, I mean, that's what gives me hope. As a man of color, when things flare up, I can look at the white brothers and sisters in my life, and I know they love me, I know they hurt with me, and I know they're the tailwind, like, man, let's go. We don't have the answers, but let's figure it out together. We're gonna run and we're gonna fight together. And that's what keeps pushing me to the front line, because I know they're fighting side by side with me.
Well,
Absolutely. 10, 20 years, what I see Fort Worth. I enjoy what everyone said here. And while everybody was talking, I was thinking we really need to start in the schools with history. We need to not sugarcoat what our history is. I didn't really learn about African American culture until I got to college. How sad is that? I mean, but aside from being at home and, you know, grandparents telling you stuff, but just at school, it was just, you know, really watered down. And I think if we change that in the schools, kids can see what hatred is and then say, you know, this is not right. This was sad. Kids are young. They have empathy. All those things. They're able to see that maybe I need to change my behavior and change these things. I'm with you. I have people of all nationalities that are really close, like brothers and sisters to me. And sometimes it gets difficult to be in a situation to where I am the only black person sitting there, and they're looking like, are you okay? And I got, like, soon as a lot of stuff started happening, I mean, calls and texts like, are you okay? And what can we do? And I'm like, I'm not okay, and I just need to go to sleep for a minute or something. So I want to see children being educated on what real history is of our community. And then I also want to see in 10 to 20 years that in Fort Worth, we are kind of, like you said, utopia, where, you know, everyone is like, nice and cordial to everyone. I can go to any store I want to, wear whatever I want to wear, and nobody's going to look at me like, what are you doing over here? Why do you belong? I'm able to afford to live in any neighborhood. Growing up in middle school, I had a white teacher tell me that because I was orphaned and raised by my grandparents and poor, that I was less likely to succeed. And there are a lot of children who look just like me who are in those classrooms that have a white teacher probably tell them the same thing. And so we need to get to the point to where these teachers are uplifting our brown and black children and encouraging them that, hey, you can do whatever God's called you to do. And they can't say God is a teacher, but they can say you can do whatever you want to do as long as you keep your grades up and all these other things. So check those biases. I want teachers to kind of take on a bigger responsibility of educating when it comes to history, and then uplifting, encouraging those youth in that time, because that's really where we're going to see the bigger change 10 to 20 years. It's going to start with these kids, elementary, middle school, high school. What are we deploying off into colleges? Once we start making those changes, then we're going to be able to see a different Fort Worth. But it has to start in the homes, and it has to start, in the church, and it has to start in the community. And people have to, because Fort Worth is, like you said, segregated. People live all kind of over the place. And so I like to go everywhere. I don't care. And so, but there's a difference. If I go to the Tum Thum right there on the other side of Hewlin, they're looking at me like probably following me around sometimes. And if I go to the Walmart on the other end of Hewlin, it's perfectly fine. So strange, right? So when is it going to be okay that I shop at Tum Thum any time of day and nobody is looking at me weird? Because I'm probably one of 2 black people they see probably the whole week at that Tom Thumb.
Man, you
We
putting
got-
Tom Thumb on blast. You're going to have to blast Tom Thumb. You're going to be canceling Tom Thumb now. Just, yeah.
So-
you mean
I
just
love
grocery
it,
store. Grocery
I love
So-
Tom Thumb, but I'm just saying, you know, it's like
Yeah.
we have to get the employees and people have to be okay with seeing a person of color and not assume that I'm there for trouble.
Yeah. So in the in the book, A History of Fort Worth in Black and White, the author talks about the Fort Worth way. In the history of Fort Worth, there were no riots, there were no protests during the Civil Rights Movement. And one of the things that he says that a community must own its past before it can lay claim to its future. And when you were talking, Q, it made me think of that. That Fort Worth's past, uniquely to Fort Worth, is that there's a Fort Worth way, and that way is to not really do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so my vision, if I can answer my own question as we close up, my vision for the city as a pastor in downtown Fort Worth who cares very deeply for the community and the city, all of the city, not just the growing parts, not just the cool parts, not just, but all of the city and all of the people in the city that God knows and loves. My vision would be to like some of the language that we use in our church a lot is that we want to fight for kingdom moments. Like the end that you know, Q, that's what drives me. What drives me is that we do know the end. And that's what compels you, and that's what compels Melissa to do the net. That's what compels us to do what we're doing. And so it's to fight for kingdom moments in the city, in every realm and every sector of the city. That if in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, there are people of the city who care about this, white, black, brown, right? Who care about this discussion and this issue and the brokenness that we all see, right? To some degree, we see it. To some degree, we have agreement around a little bit of the way forward, but that in every sector of this city, we have people fighting for kingdom moments. Whether that's government, whether that's education, whether that's music and arts, whether that's the church, whether that's civic responsibility and authority and all of that, business, whatever it is, that we would be fighting for kingdom moments. And that would be super clear so that, your kids, right? Justice, Junior, right? Your girls, you got 3 girls, that they would have something that's different than what we have right now. And so I just think Fort Worth changing the culture of doing nothing to fighting for those moments, that would be my hope and vision too. Thank you all for doing this. Yeah, you blessed us, you served us, you blessed and served the city. My hope is that we're not done in some of these conversations and some of what we're doing, but thank you all so much. And thank you guys for watching. Appreciate your interest and engagement in this. We love you, and we'll see you later.